We flipped the finger to the King of England. Stole our country from the Indians. With God on our side and guns in our hands, took it for our own. Built a nation dedicated to liberty, justice and equality. Doesn't look that way to you, it doesn't look that way to me. Sickest joke I know. Listen up, man, I'll tell you who I am. Just another stupid American. You don't want to listen, you don't want to.
Hello and welcome to Congress of the Working Class. I'm Mike. I'm here with Johnny and Esworthy. Hello, guys.
Yo. What's up?
So we're recording this on the 21st. It was another day that was supposed to be the end of the world. And much like the recent prophets, the old prophets have gotten it wrong as well. Honestly, from what I understand, the Mayans never really predicted that it was going to be the end of the world.
There's going to be a change in the world.
The world changes all the time, every day.
I mean, like a sharp change.
A sharp change?
Yeah, like, you know.
What, it's going to be square?
Yeah, that's
first
it.
Around?
That's exactly right.
No, but it was all nonsense. Everybody was really worried out.
Of course, granted, the day isn't over yet, and it is on Mayan time. So, I mean, maybe it's midnight.
What is Mayan time?
I think it's central.
You sure it's not mountain?
No, I think it's central.
I'm pretty sure, being that the fact that they don't have any, since they didn't have a leap year, we have already passed their day.
Well, we're already living in hell then. And, yeah.
Well, I could have told you that.
You know, when did that rapture thing happen?
I don't know, but apparently nobody was good enough to go.
Well, at least none of the Republicans.
But all right, so beyond that, it was nonsense. Everybody got up in arms over it. Everybody got all weirded out by it. You had some people doing some dumb shit in light of it. Michigan was shutting down. They shut down like 30-some schools over it.
Yeah. That's just retarded.
Well, it was.
Now, did they shut it down because of the apocalypse specifically? Or because somebody was going to do something because of the apocalypse?
It was a mixture of both. Because of what happened in Connecticut, which is going to be the next thing we get into. But, because of that, they were concerned that somebody may do something stupid because there were rumors, and there were rumors about the apocalypse in general. So, and they were like, well, just to be on the safe side, let's shut down all our schools. So, but yeah, this Connecticut shooting thing, I don't want to go too far into it because I don't want to make this an hour-long show about gun control and all the other factors that fall into it.
Thank God.
For those people who aren't in the loop and don't know what happened, a 20-year-old male named Adam Lanza got a hold of his mother's guns, who was a survivalist, and she did not have any safeguards on her weapons.
Which was negligent in the extreme.
She paid the ultimate price for that because her son then killed her. He then went to a local elementary school, which one version of the story I heard, he had an altercation with the people at the school the day before. He then got to the school, he shot through the door, or through the glass, walked into the school, shot the principal, the assistant principal, and the guidance counselor. Killed the guidance counselor and the principal. From what I understand, the assistant principal only had a leg wound, and she survived, I believe. Then he killed a couple other teachers. Perhaps, I'm not sure, I think they were volunteers. I think one was a volunteer or something like that, like a teacher volunteer or something along those lines. And then 20 children.
Well, I think that one of the connections that was alleged was that his mother, years ago, worked as one of those teacher volunteers, or like an assistant, school assistant volunteer kind of thing. I think that's where there was some confusion.
Well, the latest report I heard on that was that she had no ties to the school whatsoever.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
But like I said, the problem with this story, as with a lot of news stories, is that there's 20 of them that have slightly different details in each of them.
Yeah.
I've also heard that he was on an antipsychotic drug, and part of that drug was the fact of suicidal tendencies, because I didn't reach the end of that story, is that after he did all of that, he then shot and killed himself.
Mm-hmm.
He
also some kind of aggression.
Yes. Aggression was the other part of that drug. The other thing that I heard more recently was that the mother was looking to have him committed because apparently this person had a history of mental illness and other personality issues. The one thing I do want to say about gun control, like laws, as most Democrats look at, we got to ban the guns and we have to have stiffer penalties for people who use them. I would like to point out that, especially in this case, they are pointless. The mother was irresponsible, so whether or not the laws were in place, she was irresponsible, so he got a hold of the guns. So that falls into a personal responsibility on her part. Secondly, he offed himself at the end, so he doesn't face any jury or, any justice whatsoever, at least here on Earth.
Well, the thing is, the irony of that is that the justice he would probably have faced would be death, ultimately.
Oh, right.
So it's like, oh no, only we can kill. Okay,
Yeah, but he took away all the fun in having us be allowed to do it.
We see there's a lot of.
See, it's not nearly as fun here, though. See, I agree with the Middle East sometimes that we should be able to take them outside, and like the family members should be able to beat the snot out of them.
Stone them to death.
Yeah.
Well, I think in our society we kind of have to have the scapegoat in the situation, or somebody to point the finger out and blame, no matter what. And since nobody is around, we're from largely from what I'm hearing, they're blaming the firearm, which is it's contributed, but I don't think it was the root cause of this problem.
No, and
obviously,
as far as I'm concerned, I'm trying not to go real deep and far into this. As far as I'm concerned, the gun is not the problem. The problem has become a culture of apathy and cynicism, and it's one thing when you just had those few loner outsider individuals that were pretty much fuck the world. The problem has now become that it's become the majority of our society.
Oh yeah, it's become caustic to itself, and and the information age hasn't helped at all, I don't think, because now we can ostracize and criticize and demonize people
anonymously.
Anonymously without repercussions,
Right.
And we as a people seem to be a bunch of assholes. You see it in social cliques in school. You learn it that way, and that extends into life. Into adult life. There's social cliques, and that extends into everything else. And people are under so much stress nowadays between insecurity in their jobs, having to deal with beltway traffic. Whether or not they're going to be able to get the latest Apple product. It's a lot of stress, on people, and people under stressful conditions they snap. It happens. It's a fact. That we have to learn how to be able to approach people who are in those situations and embrace them pretty much, and say don't be. There's no reason for you to be afraid and alone, or feel that you're alone and being afraid of that, because you're part of a larger society, and we want to have you in it, but that doesn't happen. It's like, ew, look at that freak. That's what ends up happening.
And you know why? It's because people only believe in personal responsibility, not social responsibility. And it's because social responsibility has been demonized in this country under the guise of socialism. And so, and that's a big, big deal especially our culture right now. I don't think socialism was as big of a deal. I know communism was in the past, but I don't think socialism has ever been a big deal. But right now, and I don't know if it's just a branding thing because they want to paint the president as such. I mean, because he's not doing anything real different than any other president has ever done when it comes to social projects.
Yeah, but he's not the one that's directly responsible for that. I mean, Congress is the one that provides funding for that kind of stuff and creates those kind of programs. I mean, the executive executes what Congress, he can initiate it as far as giving Congress an idea, but they have to come up with the details about it.
Yeah. My point more along the lines falls down to the fact that we've demonized being a social construct.
Which is ironic considering social media.
Right, exactly. Exactly. That was brought together to try to make us more social, and it seems to have made us more antisocial.
Yeah, I have a theory. It's like, it's actually, sometimes we're better being, I wouldn't say segregated, but divided. No.
I'm just messing.
This is social media and technology has brought us all together in this one big lumpy soup, and it's boiling.
Okay.
We were in a much more stable state when we were the zucchini and the cabbage and everything on the counter. We knew what we were, and now we're all together. And some people, a lot of people, they don't deal with that because they're afraid of the differences and diversity. And, that even goes to people who say that are often the poster people for diversity,
Right.
It's different cultures generates fear, even within our own culture, I'd say subcultures, if you will.
Okay. Well, Johnny, I want your point now.
I pretty much just, I think part of the problem with society, I think I've said it before, is just the whole, people, we need to get our kids to be able to understand what it is to fail and how to deal with that. Mm-hmm. I think that's a lot of our problem with a lot of this stuff is nobody freaks out because they don't know how to deal with any kind of adversity.
Yeah, we don't have outs in this little league game.
Right. We're not going to keep score because you're getting stomped and we don't want you to feel bad about it.
Yeah.
But that also, to me, that also kind of says well, we don't really expect you to do any better, so we're not going to really push you. If you're getting stomped and everybody can see it, you play harder. Mm-hmm. But if, they stop keeping score and, you just give up and nobody gives a shit and you get an award anyway, who gives a fuck?
What happened to losing built character?
Well, yeah, overcoming adversity builds character. Right. Yeah, and that they've removed that. I think they've really called society as a whole and dumbed us down to that. To be honest with you.
Well, and that's one of the things we can definitely blame the liberals on because as much as I'm actually a big soccer fan and I know not a lot of people are, but the soccer in this country is so pussified because because
it's not in general.
Compared to Arsenal and Manchester United killing each other on the field.
Yeah. Well, no, but they do beat the shit out of it. They play a rough game. It's hard on the system, but the point I was getting to was, a lot of the kids that play soccer nowadays are the kids whose parents don't want them to play football because they see it as a violent sport. And, it's all the yuppies that used to be fucking hippies that just pussify the hell out of it. And they don't play hard and everything's a foul and it's just, there's no scorekeeping and, it's just, but unfortunately that's kind of spread into all sports with, everything. It doesn't get competitive until high school and then nobody knows how to deal with it.
Yeah, the
varsity. They fucking lose their mind.
Well, I think it's going farther than sports. I think it's going into society itself, really, where competition is discouraged and, happy. Let's be happy. Hug together has kind of dominated.
Right, and that was fine. That was fine and dandy until we have a bad economy, and now you're competing for a job, and you're competing for apartments, and you're competing to survive, basically, and nobody knows what the fuck to do with it, all losing their goddamn minds.
And you're on the street,
Right.
18 to 20-year-olds, it's 25% 25 to 30% unemployment at this point.
Right, everybody's moving back in, graduating college and moving back in with their parents.
If they're lucky.
You got parents that are, in a town not that far away, it was a few years ago, but they had, right in the middle of all the economic problems, you got people killing their entire families and then taking themselves out because they don't know how to deal with, losing their job.
Well, that's another, it's a stressor. Yet another stressor on our individuals in society.
But as a society, we don't know how the fuck to handle stress.
No, we don't. And we try. We do try. But it doesn't, some of the things we do is we have competitiveness when it comes to, like, video games and stuff. And if you ever played video games online, you know the kind of environment that is and the kind of things that are said to each other, and it's not a friendly environment.
I did want to talk about video games, though.
Okay. You go ahead.
I just wanted to make a quick point to it, because I know, like, everybody's like, whenever something like this happens, everybody starts blaming video games and movies. And I think I realized why, and I never could figure out why they would do it, because I'm like, I've played a ton of video games and never ever, thought about doing something like that. And then I was, like, looking back at some of the things, I'm like, there's a lot of games that are, like, just plain out, like, let's go kill shit with no context. So
I like GTA.
I'm not dissing video games because I enjoy them as well. But I'm just like, I was trying to figure out why people blame them. The same with movies. You have movies like Saw, that there's not really a motive to the fact of what he's doing. It's pretty much just a bunch of random, gruesome killings.
Well, I think movies they're an easy target for people to place the blame on.
Well, I think the blame does lie a little bit like that, but it's not for the fact of just, like, everything is not, like, there's little pieces of everything that deserve pieces of blame in every one of these scenarios.
I agree. It's a confluence of things. It's the violent culture, it's the stress, it's the guns, it's everything that contributes to.
But you know what though? I'm gonna admit the greatest thing I ever did on Grand Theft Auto when I used to play that was, my favorite thing to do was get on top of the parking garage and blow up everybody that came anywhere near, shoot people, and then shoot the people that ran up to help them, and and to the point where the police got so high that you were like, the helicopter came after you and stuff, and kill everybody in sight. And never in a million years would I ever do the same. Never in a million years would I actually do that in real life.
Right.
So,
and it can be therapeutic to a sense, in a way, to do that, because you get to do it and then it's done with.
I feel that way about actual shooting, like going out to a target range and shooting. To me, that's therapeutic.
Oh, I went ski shooting the first time and absolutely loved it. I would go probably 3 times a week if I could.
Yeah, it's fun. It's recreational, and it allows you to do something where you see a direct cause and effect from your actions.
See, now I feel weird because my idea of therapy is like doing dishes. That's like my therapy time. It's like I'm just zone out.
Things are different for women.
Yeah.
Oh, you asshole! You had to turn that around.
Well, your husband really,
Yeah, he does work a lot. He really does. But no, I just find it weird. Like, I don't have anything against guns, and I don't think they should be taken away from people. I think there's a ton of other steps that need to be taken before we get to that point. There's a lot of other things that need to be fixed.
Unfortunately, that seems to be what the left is doing right now. At least the so-called conversations that are occurring.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't even got to that point already. In so many states, they're introducing legislation to ban the possession of various things.
Well, it's the knee-jerk reaction. We've seen it with everything that's ever happened.
It's the squeaky wheel syndrome, though, where, it's the calls of the day,
Right.
And that sickens me more than anything else is that people use this to push a political agenda.
Right. I just want to bludgeon people that don't know how to make a decent argument this or to have a decent conversation about it. There's so many people that I could just on Facebook just go around and find their houses like they did at the end of like what they did in Jane Silent Bob Strike Back. They just show up, knock on the door. Are you so and so 64, and then just beat the crap out of them.
See, you shouldn't have guns.
and that would be why I don't own any yet, probably.
See, I would, it's. See, that's advocating violence because of. Now listen, you're advocating violence to solve a social issue.
And you're absolutely right, and that's why I don't do it.
That's like a lot of you take that. This is like a microcosm of the larger issues, though.
Okay.
People think that's the way to do things, and a lot of them are like the urbanites, thinking like that because that happens, You're chucked so close together, whereas a lot of the more rural people,
they just shoot each other.
No, they talk to each other or tip over each other's cows, So, I mean, it's I'm all for it. If a city wants to restrict what kind of firearms are in the city for defensive purposes, that makes sense and to a point because some firearms aren't meant for close quarters. I mean, they aren't. They're not safe to fire in close quarters.
Okay.
And some are, So, I mean, it's one of those things. I don't think the outright banning of stuff is going to work.
No.
Because that's going to trigger a fight, and it's going to be a continuing fight, and it'll be like Afghanistan on our streets. And not because, it'll be like, people aren't going to comply. And, but the same token, restricting things isn't necessarily going to be the answer either. I mean, it's a really, really complex issue.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, from every side.
And everybody tries to oversimplify it with their...
It's true. And from my perspective as a gun owner and a firearms enthusiast, it seems like every time something like this happens, I get less... My freedom in executing my rights of the Second Amendment become more and more restricted. And I didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
That's
well, see, I got a question for you.
Your problem is that you didn't join a well-regulated militia.
Actually, he did. You just can't talk about it. My point to that, my question for you is, I mean, one of the big things. Now, I know that legal gun owners, are the ones that a lot of people don't. People that are legal, responsible gun owners. That's where, you don't want to start putting in bans on what you can buy and what you can't buy illegally, right? Right? That's what you're
Those are the people that are going to comply with the regulations anyway.
Right.
So they're legal gun owners, yeah.
All right, so would you be willing to get rid of, the gun show loopholes and stuff like that?
Well,
because the problem is that a private seller can sell a gun to somebody without any kind of check. And they can just walk right out of there with however much they want to spend on guns, and it doesn't have to be registered or anything. Those things, that's what's more frightening. I mean, I have no problem with legal gun owners that want to go through and do what they need to do. But when you're doing that, because you don't know who you're selling to.
Okay, look, I sold my a pistol to my nephew. Okay. Now, there was a procedure for that.
Right.
All right. We went down to the Maryland State Police Barracks. Walked in there. They said, go get the gun. We went and got the gun from the trunk, right? Because you don't just walk into a police station with a gun.
That's probably a good idea.
Okay. And, they took a look at the gun and got the serial number off of it and everything.
Okay.
And then my nephew filled out a form. I filled out a form. And we pretty much, did what same thing you would do at a firearms dealer through in this case, the Maryland State Police.
All right.
And I had, they said, they told me if you don't get a letter in a week, you can give them the gun. I was like, okay. Now, the gun show loophole that you're referring to, isn't about pistols. Okay, it's about, because to legally sell a pistol, you have to go through that process or go through an FFL, deal with somebody with a license. Okay? And if they're
what if
selling,
you're doing it under the table?
Well, then it's illegal. Then it's illegal anyway.
Yeah, but those are usually legal gun owners selling it under the table.
Well, then they're still committing an illegal act because they have to record the transfer of a controlled firearm.
Well, then would you be opposed to a massive penalty for not knowing where the fuck your gun is, or claiming you don't know where the fuck your gun is?
There is a penalty for that.
But how bad is it really?
5 years, $10,000 fine.
And what's actually given?
5 years, $10,000 fine. In fact, there was a case in Carroll County not too long ago where somebody stole a bunch of guns from a private individual, and they didn't report it, and they actually got jail time for that because they failed to report the theft of the firearm, which is illegal. But to get to the point of the gun show loophole, I think that in large part is a creation. It's like a talking point. It's a legal seller, a dealer at the gun show. Okay, whether they're selling a rifle or a pistol or whatever, they have to do the paperwork.
Okay.
And if you would go to a gun show, and I've done this, my very first firearm I purchased was through a gun show. You go there, you look at the gun and say, I like that, give me. You give them the money. You fill out paperwork. They make a phone call. This is for a rifle now, because there's different rules for rifles and pistols. Okay, a rifle or a shotgun. Okay, they call a phone number. Okay, this phone number it's through the ATF, and basically there's somebody on the other end that looks up on a computer based on your social security number through and NCIC, which is National Crime Index conglomerate or report or something. Whether or not you're a felon, whether or not you're on restraining order, whether or not your report is being being in a psychiatric hospital during your adult life, and things like that. And that's the reason why it's only a phone call now. It used to be like a couple days thing. Okay, and before 1986 they didn't have it, but after 1986 they added this. It used to be a couple day thing, and now it's all computerized and database. It's just a phone call, and then boom, you get a gun if you're approved. Otherwise, it's denied. And if the seller sells outside of that, without doing that, he can get in a lot of deep shit and have criminal penalties and fines, on him.
Okay.
So I mean, there's rules in place.
Well, the only reason I'm talking about that is because I watched a documentary about. It was mostly along like the border states. They were talking about the guns moving into Mexico.
Right.
So it was mostly other states. I know the rules vary from state to state.
That's true.
But like this guy walked in. What's that?
Especially for long guns like rifles and shotguns.
Okay. Well, a guy walked into a gun show. I think it was in it was either in New Mexico or Arizona.
Okay.
And he went in, and they had like the legal dealers. Like you would have to go up, you'd have to do a background check, and all that stuff. And then there were private sellers that were on the side that were like I forget what their designation was, but I think they were just like collectors. And they weren't like actual like formal sellers. And the guy pretty much was like, yeah, I don't think I'd pass a background check. He told the guys this. And they were like, oh, don't worry about it. And they sold them like AK-47s and stuff. You know, and to me, that's what worries me about that scenario. And, you know, I understand what you're talking about, you know, where you have to do certain things and there's certain steps and there's penalties and stuff like that. But when you have something like that can legally go on in a state, you know, where you just walk up and pretty much go, you know, I wouldn't pass a background check. Oh, well, here's a gun anyway.
I've seen that happen, though.
You know?
I mean, I've seen a guy, he was from Baltimore, and this was at a gun show in New York, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
He wanted to buy a shotgun.
Oh.
And it was a shotgun that isn't legal in Maryland.
Okay.
Without a certain class. You have to register a certain way. And as what's called a short barrel rifle.
Okay.
Okay. And the guy was like, I'm from Maryland. I want to buy this gun. And I was standing right next to the guy when I was talking to him. And he's like, well, I can't sell you this gun. He's like, well, why not? It's because you're from Maryland. And he's like, well, but I have the money and everything. He's like, no. So, well, how can I do this? Well, basically what you got to do is go down to Maryland, talk to an FFL down there, have them send the paperwork. They send the gun to that FFL. And then that FFL goes through the paperwork for the ATF about the SBR stuff, and you go through the process there with the background check and all that stuff. I've never seen anybody at a gun show selling weapons illegally.
Well, that's good.
And I've been to a lot of gun shows.
And that's good. That makes me feel better because this wasn't as common of a case as they made it to seem to be on the document.
I think because it's
I mean, how do you know how many of them are legal and aren't legal? I mean, obviously if you're standing right there, but you know if there's two guys off in the corner, I mean.
Yeah, but that can happen anywhere. It just happens at a gun show. Doesn't mean it's the gun show loop. That can happen in an alley. You know, I mean, it's
But my question is if they're supposedly responsible gun owners, why wouldn't they do stuff like that? You know, why wouldn't they go through the proper channels?
Well, there's, I think because there's a lot of fees associated with it. And if you sell too many guns,
I'm sure you get flagged.
Well, you get flagged, but they also make you get a dealer's license, which is like $800 and even more thorough paperwork that they can come into your house at any time and all this other shit.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, it's and people say that either they inherit a gun collection, all right, and they want to get rid of it, but they can't. You know, and they don't want all these guns, but they want to get rid of it. You know, I can see people doing that. And and with rifles and shotguns, they're unlike pistols. You can actually just trade those, freely. All right,
yeah,
and that includes semi-automatic shotguns and rifles.
I've actually been
which is probably what the AK-47 was that you saw.
Gotcha.
All right, and technically that's not an illegal trade because it's a semi-automatic weapon. Just because it looks mean, it looks like a fully automatic weapon, doesn't make it a mean fully automatic weapon.
No, I'm just saying that they're turning around giving a semi-automatic weapon away essentially to somebody who said they wouldn't pass a background check. You know, that's what threw up the red flags to me about the scenario.
Well, hey, that's just a shitty person doing a shitty thing.
Right.
And you're going to find those in every business, whether it's fast food or, gun dealing.
Well, according to the internet, and we all know the internet never lies, it's one of the gun blog sites, actually. A guy was asking what happens if your guns are stolen used to commission a crime. And a cop responded and said, unless your answers don't jive, nothing. Even if you didn't report it stolen.
That's not the case in Maryland.
They won't actually prosecute.
That's not the case in Maryland. I mean, I've heard of people getting, read it in a paper about people getting busted because, and it's even, that can't be right because it's an ATF thing. I mean, basically they have to report the firearm as stolen so the FBI knows it's stolen because they're the ones that keep track of all the records.
My big thing, and I know there's some gun people out there that disagree with this, but I just think that you should be required to have a trigger lock on everything.
Well,
and that way, Like obviously the killer got all the guns from his mom. If she had a trigger lock on him and he didn't know where the key was, she'd still be alive right now.
But you can only passively enforce that, though, unless you have people coming into your homes on a regular basis to search them. I mean, the only way you could...
Right, but if you have that law in place, then, if somebody gets a hold of your guns and there's no lock on them, then,
That wouldn't have helped anything here. I mean, it would have... I mean,
it might have saved her life.
It's just fine.
Saved her life if she would have actually used them. There was a law in place.
Well, yeah, but
citizen.
And she complied with the law.
Right.
I mean, the law has to have some teeth somehow. I mean,
right.
After
my
fact,
thing is that if the law was in place and she was a law-abiding citizen, it would have saved a lot of lives.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not she was a law-abiding citizen, we don't know. But as far as I'm aware of, in Connecticut, there are no trigger lock laws.
Right.
So, I mean, at least have it in place that we could say, oh, okay, well, you know what, she screwed up because she didn't have the trigger locks on. If the law's not there, she's not doing anything really wrong by not doing it, and it just costs a bunch of people their lives, and yes, it's a tragedy, but really there's no fault in that. But
yeah, I mean, that's what I mean. It's like even if there was a law, it doesn't mean that people are going to comply with it. I mean, look at seatbelt laws, Look at
right,
cell
but
phone
all right.
laws.
So you have a situation where there's a trigger lock law in the state, and the person doesn't use it. Kid finds the gun, shoots himself in the head by accident. Then they violate the trigger lock law, and as fucked up as it sounds to some people, you prosecute the person for not having their firearm secured.
But you know what? It would be their fault. Unless they somehow bypass the trigger lock mechanism, which is possible.
Right.
But
it would be their fault.
And they should have responsibility for their firearm. They should.
Agreed, which is why there should be. But that's what I'm saying.
I'm not disagreeing with trigger lock laws at all.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a minor thing. I mean, that's not taking anything away
from
the firearm.
But there are a lot of people that are fighting over that because they're like, I don't want to do that because I don't want to have to worry about somebody coming to my house and I have to go, hold on, Mr. Bad Guy, let me go get my gun and unlock it.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be trigger locked either. It can also be in a safe, and there are safes out there that exist that are quick opening. It's like
my dad's got a loaded 9mm right next to his bed in a case. It takes 4 quick button pushes. You don't have to spin anything. There's nothing like that.
Yeah.
It's literally throw a code in, and the thing pops and forcibly pops open quickly.
Yeah, I mean,
you push the 4 buttons and it spring loads open.
And this is where the argument gets pissy for me because there's a lot these are all wonderful things. Like we're talking about stuff that legitimately should be put in place and that people that claim to be responsible gun owners should be doing. And the problem that I see is that a ton of people that claim to be that argue against it.
Well, that's
and it's not like I'm trying to knock you at all, Swarth, because I know you agree with this stuff. So I mean, but the thing is that it just really bothers me that there are people out there who are just like, yeah, fuck it, I don't have any responsibility to anybody other than me. And it's not, and it's a societal thing, as we pointed out at the beginning of the conversation. It really is a societal thing.
I agree. I mean, there are people like that, but like I said, they're everywhere in society, not just regarding guns.
Right, and you're right.
I mean, there's other aspects where it's like, that law, fuck it, People drink and drive. I know people who drink and drive,
Right.
Because they've even gotten DUIs. They still drink and drive because they're alcoholics.
That's a whole other thing. I can go off on a rant on that, but
anyway,
even there was a famous I know I'm talking about soccer a lot tonight. But there was a famous soccer player in England, and usually famous people in the U.S. seem to get off no matter what they do. Famous soccer player in England was drinking and driving, didn't even hurt anybody. They gave him 6 fucking years.
Good.
Because he fucking, it was like his 3rd time or something. They're like, you're done. They sent him to jail.
Of course, England, in a lot of ways, is a very draconian state. I mean, they have some very, very weird laws over there that are, very heavy-handed, especially regarding firearms, And they have a lot of violence over there. So, I mean, it's you got to take each thing in its own context, and its own environment and figure out what to do. But anyway, that's half hour on that.
Yeah. I did just want to point out one thing. A lot of people are talking about putting arming teachers in school. I think that's a very bad idea with guns.
I agree. Most teachers are afraid of guns.
Well, it's not so much of that. It's the fact of, you're essentially locking your children in a room with somebody who's armed. What could possibly go wrong? And I'm not just talking about the teacher doing something. I'm talking about the students being able to get a hold of it and something happening. You're then putting them in extraordinarily close proximity to something like that. So I don't think that's a very smart move. Now, if they want to do something like tasers, where they have the ones like the police have that have the cartridges on them that are like a gun, so you shoot at a distance, you don't have to be in close proximity. I can agree with that. Having police on campus, which is what the recommendation is right now, I think if they do that, there needs to be some strict interaction rules or guidelines that need to be put in place, because I do not want to hear about something about kids being in a fight and a cop shooting them over it.
Well, they chase them over it.
Cops don't do things like that. It's not like they shoot, say shoplifters at Walmart or anything,
They do.
They only use their weapons when they need to.
That's not true. Not at all.
Now, I've heard of cops tasering kids in school for just mouthing off to them.
Right, exactly. That's what concerns me about it.
Well, I'm totally...
I guess you guys actually missed the police shooting the woman for shoplifting a Walmart story.
Yeah, I did, actually. But like I said, it wouldn't surprise me if it happened.
That was the top of the mark for you two. How'd you miss that on the 24-hour anti-police network?
I haven't looked at it lately. I'm against having cops in schools, but you know what? On that, something like this happens, I can concede that.
Right.
Saying, okay, well, it's better than nothing.
Let's be honest. How many schools are we talking about? How many cops are we talking about? And who's going to foot the bill?
Homeland Security. Maybe not bombing a random Middle East country every week.
That's true.
Hey.
Maybe not, groping
taking out that wedding. Taking out that wedding was worth the $4 million bomb that we used to do it. Okay. You need to get your shit straight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, my concern becomes, are we trading one danger for another or for our children?
Well, life's not safe. I mean,
and I know that life's not safe, but the question is how do you mitigate as much danger as you possibly can? It's just why should I put airbags in a car? Because we're trying to keep as many people from dying in a car accident as possible. If we weren't worried about that,
that's not taking anything away from anybody. Though.
And we wouldn't be taking anything away from anybody by not putting police in schools.
Well, that's true. Except for, the politicians who can't seem to balance the spreadsheet.
Well, I agree. But my other question is this, and I really wish I could find numbers on this because I really want to know. Because a lot of people are like, if you pass any kind of gun ban, it's going to only affect legal gun owners, which is a very true, honest point. My question then becomes, with these mass shootings, how many of them were used by illegal guns? Because we seem to make out that it's always like criminals that go and do this, and yes, they become a criminal once they do it. But my question is are the guns being obtained legally? Because if they are, then we have a problem there.
Well, remember,
they're usually somebody else's that they've got them from. Whether I think Columbine, it was like grandparents. They were purchased legally for the guy at Virginia Tech.
They were purchased legally for the Colorado shooting.
Right.
Or one.
The ones, as far as we can tell, the ones in Connecticut were legally purchased. They were his mom's and taken from her. Well, they've all been legally purchased. That's the thing.
He was denied, from what I understand, this Lanza guy was denied a purchase of a firearm because he didn't want to have the waiting period. Recent, like a week before all this went down.
Red flag.
Well, yeah, and so technically, he obtained the guns illegally,
right,
by the letter of the law. So placing more restrictions as far as what guns are out there, what types of guns, or what
That wasn't my point of that scenario.
I understand. I'm just saying, I don't know. I don't see how that would help with people who obtain guns illegally.
I don't either. That's why I'm not for banning guns. My question is, everybody's making this argument because they were legal firearms, but I want to know, like, what percentage of the guns have been were legally obtained as opposed to illegally obtained?
That'd be good. That'd be a good question.
Because I can't find it anywhere. I've looked for statistics on it, and I'm.
But you know what? Another statistic, and I thought of this earlier.
Okay.
Regarding the officers in the school, it's like you're not going to find statistics on the deterrence value of having somebody with a gun protecting other people in their vicinity, because many times no crime happens. So they don't go into a statistic. You don't have that statistic. And a lot of people are pointing out, it's like, oh, people who have guns never, ever have defended themselves successfully and all this other stuff. Well, yeah, but you don't know how many times somebody who had ill intent was planning something like this and say, oh, well, there's a guy there who might shoot me. I don't know.
Well, they statistically, they did show that states that have conceal and carry have lower carjacking rates than states that don't have conceal and carry. On the other hand, banks also did a study and stopped having armed guards because they found out that having an armed guard led to more violence than not having an armed guard.
I think that with the banks, I think it just opens them up to liability, so they didn't want to have liability.
It's easier. They'd rather, because no, it does lead to more. I mean, when the security guard fires at the robbers fire back, then all of a sudden...
Right, all of a sudden you got a shootout.
Fire. Right. So it's easier just to give up the money. And, yeah, you're right, it might open them up to liability as well, but they've shown that both sides having guns just leads to more violence. But I think in the bank scenario, the original intent was to intimidate and not necessarily to actually use violence on part of the robber.
The threat of violence.
Right. So they didn't actually intend to kill somebody, whereas it's a totally different scenario, like in Connecticut, where the guy was intending to do violent harm. Then
well, see, what worries me is if there was
gun there.
If there was an armed guard there, what would have happened? That's what I would love to know. That like if there was an armed guard at the school, and would there have been a shootout? Would more people have gotten injured? Would less people gotten injured? So. I mean, he was walking in there to cause a problem to begin with. We all know that, But would the violence have ended faster, or would it wind up being more casualties because it would have wound up being a shootout in the hallway?
I think there probably would have been less because he tried to forcibly enter the school and then shot the window out.
Right.
And I think that would have been, depending on the placement of the SRO, would probably alerted them at that point, and they could have started heading that way. I mean, as it stands, we had people that were unarmed, in all respects, basically taking bullets for kids as shields. I can't help to think that if one of those people had happened to have a firearm, whether it could have ended this faster, or at least drew fire to them to let the others get away. You know what I mean? Because somebody, it's a really hard question.
Right.
I mean, there's no easy answer to it either. I mean, there's no, because there's so many sides to it, and we don't even have all the information. Yet we're drawing conclusions from
the other question I kind of have and have wondered a little bit about, and is. They have all these procedures. Well, they have lockdown procedures. Well, obviously, locking them down in the classroom didn't help because he just pretty much went classroom to classroom for a few of them. I almost have to wonder if maybe sometimes the scenario wouldn't be better just to get them out the window and out of the damn school. But I mean, their policy is to lock down, but that just confines them in that area, and there's not really.
Yeah, but if they're locked down inside, then with the guy inside, that ain't going to help them. That just makes it an easy killing ground. I mean,
that's what happened at Virginia Tech.
If the thing with lockdown is, if it's great if you have the architecture to actually create a defensive structure, but modern architecture does not.
if you have bulletproof doors and all that, then that's great.
Yeah, but everything, modern architecture is all windows, and it doesn't really have a defensive value, and it's kind of like an illusion of safety, and it really isn't. It actually, and I think in this case it hurt, to be honest.
What happened to the hallways being rows of lockers with concrete behind it, and then like a heavy wooden door?
Well, now they're all like, they can move everything, and they have like walls that are just little panels they can fold back to make bigger rooms.
Right.
You've all seen them. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, it's not a fortification anymore. I mean, and there's no reason for it to be a fortification, but now, I mean, you got architecture. Maybe you might have to rethink that if you're going to use those procedures. I don't know.
Well, my question is that I mean, do we look at it like we did 9/11? Like, oh well, if we do this, the terrorists win. Just go about your life, or do we legislate ourselves into a restrictive government like we did with the Patriot Act?
Exactly. I mean, that's the dangerous thing that a lot of people are worried about with how they're already started with the restrictive laws. Mm. A lot of people say, well, come on. I mean, you people aren't, the politicians, obviously aren't thinking about this. You already had this written out, obviously, because you're already submitting it. You don't come up with this stuff that instantly. This was obviously a planned thing for you. You were just waiting for the right opportunity to throw it out to the public eye.
Well, they had already announced before this happened that they were working on it. They were working on the new version of the Brady Bill.
Yeah, well.
And this is pretty much what it was. But the woman that was writing it is staunchly anti-gun.
Feinstein.
And I've seen a picture of her holding a weapon, and she had her finger on the trigger, and she was in a crowd. She has no business talking about guns because she obviously doesn't know anything about them. And that kind of thing even really rankles me. It's like you have people that know nothing about the subject matter determining the extent of the subject matter. And what's legal, what you can have and what you can't have. It's like, it's not for hunting. Well, owning firearms isn't about hunting solely and exclusively.
So, hold on a second here now. We wound up jumping past our time that we were going to talk about this.
I know. I tried to stop.
I know.
Y'all went on.
Well, we let's put it this way. We were already talking about, idiots with dumb opinions, so we can just move right on to the next subject with that.
Right, exactly where I was going. This week they wound up having a couple of the funerals for the people that were killed in Connecticut. And I would like to point out that Connecticut wasn't the only big thing that happened. There was probably about 7 or 8 mass shootings over that weekend. Either that or there were attempted mass shootings that were caught in the middle of it. There was one that person was getting ready to walk into a movie theater and do one in Texas, I believe. And an off-duty police officer shot the guy. And didn't kill him, but stopped the rampage of it.
Somebody who had a gun stopped something?
An off-duty police officer, yes. And I have no problem with the police officer stopping something like that. It's ordinary citizens that aren't trained to handle that situation that concern me about trying to stop that. Not that I don't think they shouldn't, but at the same time, are they prepared to be under that pressure? Have they had the training for it? Are they
I really don't put a whole lot of faith in officer firearms handling ability. I hear, yes, they put 135 rounds into the suspect and the surrounding area. I mean,
like what happened in New York when
when
they went to shoot the guy in New York that killed his boss and then shot like 2 pedestrians walking down the street on top of that.
Yeah.
All right, y'all got off topic again.
Yeah, we did. But
anyway, we were talking about the Westboro Baptist Church.
Yes, they were going to attempt to come and protest at the funerals of these children and teachers. And Anonymous vowed to destroy them. They've released a ton of their information, like personal phone numbers. I've seen petitions since they released the address, they want people to send as much gay porn to them as possible in the mail.
I'm game. They came to my town and protested the Marines' funeral.
Yeah.
I'm all about fucking them over.
Yeah.
Yeah, apparently they hacked into, they even hacked into her personal desktop, like the spokesperson, and changed it to gay porn.
Awesome.
They
They
hacked
took over a Twitter account.
Hacked her Twitter account, and I think they actually used her Twitter account to start the White House petition to get him put in as a hate group.
No,
Yeah.
I normally that's great. That's elegant. I normally don't advocate mass violence, but I think to these people sometimes,
Well, I personally think Anonymous is handling it the way it should be handled, which is pretty much just fuck with them into submission.
right.
You know,
Of course, then they can claim to be the victim of Anonymous, which is technically like a terrorist group to the government.
Yeah.
Well, the way, and the messed up thing is that the Westboro Baptist actually really looks forward to things like this, and the reason they do is because that's where they get the bulk of their money. Because one of the main guys is a lawyer, and they actually try to get.
It's Shirley Phelps that's a lawyer. But
Okay, one of them's a lawyer, and what they do is they actually want people to like punch them at protests and stuff because they sue them, and that's how they keep their funds going.
So it's basically a litigious, like that one company that basically sues over patents all the time.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So it's basically a litigious organization.
Yep.
Yeah, but then that's why I like Anonymous fucking with them, because you can't really nail down who one of them is.
Well, they're anonymous.
Right. And so they could just sit there and, they could sit there and fuck with them all day and just continue to fuck with them, and as long as they're not getting caught by the FBI or anything. But the other thing that I thought was kind of interesting about this is that Anonymous and the KKK and the NAACP and the ACLU all pretty much hate the Westboro Baptist Church. So
wow.
You got all these
dogs and cats living together.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, the KKK said they would actually do one of like the counter protests where they block the view of the Westboro Baptist people from the people being buried.
In this one circumstance, I'm with the KKK.
Yeah.
If you want to get some neo-Nazis up there, go right ahead.
All right. If there's anybody's going to do some violence to them, it's them. So if there's anybody's going to do any violence to them, it's going to be them. That works out, because then we kind of let the Klan go ahead and beat up the Westboro Baptist Church, let the Westboro Baptist Church sue the Klan, everybody wins.
See, I feel the same way about the, Jews and the Arabs. Let them kill each other.
Well, that's one thing I did hear about the scenario, and I was kind of like flabbergasted over it, because it was like somebody was saying, it was one of some site I looked at, said that this shooting was retaliation because we let the Palestinians win in the UN from Israel.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I'm like, you're stretching a little far there, I think.
That's
what's funny though is that as much as everybody said, Occupy Wall Street was a racist group because they were against Zionist Israel. I didn't want to believe it at first, but the more I pay attention to what they post, at least what they post on Facebook, it is a lot of that. It's a lot of fuck Israel, pro-Palestine.
Well, underdogs have to stick together.
Yeah. I mean, I was just like, I'm like, it's at some points it gets to the point of ridiculousness with them, and I have to, I feel the need to step in and go, you know what, dude, get fucked back on target. We're talking about Wall Street and financial reform and a bunch of other shit, and here you are worrying about fucking Israel and Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, back on
the Jews are all about profits.
Wow.
Yes, they are.
That's a horrible joke.
Yes, it was.
It's not really, but it's funny.
But I just thought it was really interesting because, a lot of people have come together over this Connecticut shooting, and I'm pretty sure it's because of the children, more than anything else.
Yeah, and they'll get used too because it's the children.
Right, and it's a shame that that's what it's going to come down to. But it was nice to see one of the kids wanted to be a firefighter. So, a bunch of New York Fire Department guys came up and came to the funeral. So, I mean, at some points, it makes me go, there is some, there still is humanity out there. As much as I think that everything's extraordinarily callous, when I see stuff like that, it makes me have it renews my faith in humanity a tiny bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that I understand that I think this needs to be a catalyst for hopefully trying to make our society better, not necessarily legislating us into submission. But hopefully it'll be a little bit of a wake up call to parents and legislators alike that we can't legislate ourselves into the ground. So
they'll want to create their crystal prison to make everybody safe.
Making everybody safe is never going to be never going to be a possibility. I mean, most you can do is try to mitigate a circumstance. I mean, and that's what you do anywhere you go to, and that's about it. But I mean, the fact of, truly, I think it's hilarious that anybody thinks that guns will get banned in this country. Because my point was, I was talking with Johnny on the phone before, was the fact that even if they put the assault weapon ban back into place, right? They are not going to come door to door and take everybody's assault weapons.
Well, if they make it illegal to possess one,
well, they're not.
That makes the whole class.
Before. They'll make
that's what they're doing in Maryland here.
I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah, it's they basically saying sale or possession, which would make basically a whole entire group of people instant criminals, and that's what people are up in arms about.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't think it should be done like that. I mean, but at the same time, the point I was trying to make with it originally was if they're not going to confiscate the guns, the law is useless. Just means you can't sell new ones because there's already ones out and about.
Right. That's the only logical end game is confiscation, and that's what we're fighting against.
And I don't want to see confiscation because there are people out there who are responsible with them, and I don't think the problem is the weapon. I think the problem is the people, the individual, in our society. I don't think it's laws, and I don't think it's the guns. So, how's that for a pinko liberal commie? But
Russians had guns.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. All right. Well, that's going to be the end of the show. I didn't touch on something I wanted to touch on, but this all was important to have a discussion. It was important to have it in a public venue, and I hope that more people will talk about it. Like I said, that's the end of the show. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And that's it from Congress of the Working Class. Good night.
Listen up, man, I'll tell you who